The Screwtape Letters, Part 10, Finale, starting at letter 28. My dear Wormwood, when I told you not to fill your letters with rubbish about the war, I meant, of course, that I did not want to have your rather infantile rhapsodies about the death of men and the destruction of cities. In so far as the war really concerns the spiritual state of the patient, I naturally want full reports, and on this aspect you seem singularly obtuse. Thus, you tell me with great glee that there is reason to expect heavy air raids on the town where the creature lives. This is a crying example of something I have complained about already: your readiness to forget the main point in your immediate enjoyment of human suffering. Do you not know that bombs kill men? Or do you not realize that the patient's death at this moment is precisely what we want to avoid? He has escaped the worldly friends with whom you tried to entangle him. He has fallen in love with a very Christian woman and is temporarily immune from your attacks on his chastity. And the various methods of corrupting his spiritual life, which have been trying so far unsuccessful at the present moment, at the full impact of the war draws near and his worldly hopes take a proportionately lower place in his mind, full of his defense work, full of the goal, forced to attend to his neighbors more than he has ever done before, and liking it more than he expected. Taken out of himself, as the humans say, and daily increasing in conscious dependence on the enemy, he will most certainly be lost to us if he is killed tonight. This is so obvious that I am ashamed to write it. I sometimes wonder if you young fiends are not kept out of temptation duty too long at a time, if you are not in some danger of becoming infected by the sentiments and values of the humans among whom you work. They, of course, do tend to regular death as the prime evil, and survival as the greatest good. But that is because we have taught them to do so. Do not let us be infected by our own propaganda. I know it seems strange that your chief aim at the moment should be the very same thing for which the patient's lover and his mother are praying, namely, his bodily safety. But so is this: you should be guarding him like the apple of your eye. If he dies now, you lose him. If he survives the war, there is always hope. The enemy has guarded him from you through the first great wave of temptations. But if only he can be kept alive, you have time itself for your ally. The long, dull, monotonous years of middle-aged prosperity or middle-aged adversity are excellent campaigning weather. You see, it is so hard for these creatures to persevere. The routine of adversary, the general decay of youthful loves and youthful hopes, the quiet despair, hardly felt as pain, to ever overcoming the chronic temptations with which we have again and again defeated them, the drabness which we create in our lives, and the inarticulate resentment with which we teach them to respond to it. All this provides admirable opportunities of wearing out the soul by attrition. If, on the other hand, the middle years proved prosperous, our position is even stronger. Prosperity knits a man to the world. He feels that he is finding his place in it, while really it is finding its place in him. His increasing reputation, his widening circle of acquaintances, his sense of importance, the growing pressure of absorbing the agreeable work, build him a sense of being really at home in earth, which is just what we want. You'll notice that the young are generally less unwilling to die than the middle-aged and the old. The truth is, the enemy, having oddly destined these mere animals in life in his own eternal world, has guarded them pretty effectively from the danger of feeling at home anywhere else. That is why we must often wish long lives to our patients. 70 years is not a day too much for a difficult task of unraveling their souls from heaven and building up a firm attachment to the earth. While they are young, we find them always shooting off at a tangent. Even if we contrive to keep them ignorant of explicit religion, the incalculable winds of fantasy and music and poetry, the mere face of a gull, the song of a bird, or the sight of the horizon, are always blowing our whole structure away. They will not apply themselves steadily to worldly advancement, prudent connections, and the policy of safety first. So innovate in their appetite for heaven that our best method, at this stage, of attaching them to the earth is to make them believe that earth can be turned into heaven at some future date, or politics, or eugenics, or science, or psychology, or whatnot. Real worldliness is the work of time assisted. Of course, by pride, for we teach them to describe the creeping death as a good sense of maturity or experience. Experience, in the particular sense, we teach them to give it is by and by a most useful word. A great human philosopher nearly let out secret when he said that where virtue is concerned, experience is the mother of illusion. But thanks to the change in fashion, and also, of course, to the historical point of view, we have largely rendered his book innocuous. How valuable time is to us may be gauged by the fact that the enemy allows us so little of it. The majority of the human race dies in infancy. Of the survivors, a good many die in youth. It is obvious that to him, his human birth is importantly chiefly to the qualification for human death, and death solely as the gate to that other kind of life. We are allowed to work only in the selected minority of the race, and what humans call a normal life is the exception. Apparently, he wants some, but only for a very few of the human animals with which he is peopling heaven to have the experience of resisting us through the earthly life of 60 or 70 years. While there is our opportunities, the smaller it is, the better we must use it. Whatever you do, keep your patient as safe as you possibly can. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. My dear Wormwood, now that it is certain the German humans will bombard your patient's town, and that his duties will keep him in the thick of the danger, we must consider our policy. Are we to aim at cowardice or at courage, with consequent pride or the hatred of the Germans? Well, I am afraid it is no good trying to make him brave. Our research development has not yet discovered, though success is hourly expected, how to produce any virtue. This is a serious handicap. To be greatly and effectively wicked, a man needs some virtue. What would Attila have been without his courage, or Shylock without his self-denial as regards of the flesh? But as we cannot supply these qualities ourselves, we must only use them as supplied by the enemy, and this means leaving him a kind of foothold in those men whom otherwise we have made most securely our own. A very unsatisfactory arrangement, but, I trust, we shall one day learn to do better. Hatred we can manage. The tension of human nerves during noise, danger, and fatigue make them prone to any violent emotion, and it is only a question of guiding this susceptibility into the right channels. If conscience resists, muddle him. Let him say that he feels hatred not of his own behalf, but on that of the women and children, and that a Christian is told to forgive his own, not other people's enemies. In other words, let him consider himself sufficiently identified with the women and children to feel hatred on their behalf, but not sufficiently unidentified to regard their enemies as his own and therefore proper objects of forgiveness. But hatred is best combined with fear. Cowardice alone, of all of its vices, is purely painful, horrible to anticipate, horrible to fear, horrible to remember. Hatred has its pleasures. It is therefore often the compensation by which a frightened man reimburses himself for the miseries of fear. The more he fears, the more he will hate, and hatred is also a great anodyne for shame. To make a deep wound in his charity, you should therefore first defeat his courage. Now this is a ticklish business. We have made men proud of most vices, but not of cowardice. Whenever we have almost succeeded in doing so, the enemy permits a war or an earthquake or some other calamity, and at once courage becomes so obviously lovely and important, and even in human eyes, that all of our work is undone, and there is still at least one vice of which they feel genuine shame. The danger of introducing cowardice in our patients, therefore, is lest we produce real self-knowledge and self-loathing with consequent repentance and humility. And in fact, in the last war, thousands of humans, by discovering their own cowardice, discovered the whole moral world for the first time. In peace, we can make many of them ignore good and evil entirely. In danger, the issue is forced upon them in the guise of which even we cannot blind them. There is here a cruel dilemma before us. If we promoted justice and charity among men, we should be playing directly into the enemy's hands. But if we guide them to the opposite behavior, this sooner or later produces, or he permits it to produce, a war or a revolution, and the undistinguishable issue of cowardice or courage awakes thousands of men from moral stupor. This, indeed, is probably one of the enemy's motives for creating a dangerous world, a world in which moral issues really come to the point. He sees as well as you do that courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality, a chastity or honesty or mercy, which yields to danger, will be chaste or dishonest or merciful only on conditions. Pilate was merciful till he became risky. It was therefore possible to lose as much as we gain by making a man a coward. We can learn too much about himself. There is, of course, always the chance not of chloroforming the shame, but of aggravating it and producing despair. This would be a great triumph. It would show that he had believed in and accepted the enemy's forgiveness of the other sins only because he himself did not fully feel their sinfulness. That in respect of the one vice which he really understands, in its full depth of dishonor, he cannot seek nor credit the mercy. But I fear you have already let him get too far in the enemy's school, and he knows that despair is a greater sin than any of the sins which provoke it. As of the actual technique of temptations to cowardice, not much need to be said. The main points is that the precautions have a tendency to increase fear. The precautions publicly enjoined on your patient, however, soon became a matter of routine, and this effect disappears. What you do is to keep running in his mind, side by side with the conscious intentions of doing his duty, the vague idea of all sort of things he can do and not do, inside the framework of the duty, which means to make him a little safer. Get his mind off the simple rule, I've got to stay here and do so and so, into a series of imaginary lifelines. If I happened, though, I very much hope it won't. I could do B, and in the worst case comes the worst, I can always do C. Superstitions, if not recognized as such, can be awakened. The point is to keep him feeling that he has something, other than the enemy and courage the enemy supplies, to fall back on, so that when was intended to be a total commitment of duty becomes honeycombed all through with little unconscious reservations. By building up a series of imaginary expedients to prevent the worst coming to the worst, we may produce at that level of his will, which he is not aware of, a determination that the worst shall not come to the worst. Then, at the moment of true terror, rush out into his nerves and muscles, and you may get a fractal act done before he knows what you are about. For remember, the act of cowardice is at what matters. The emotion of fear is, in itself, no sin, and through the joy of it, does us no good. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. My dear Wormwood, I sometimes whether you think you have been sent into the world for your own amusement. I gather not from your miserably inadequate report, but from that of the infernal police, that the patient's behavior during the first raid has been the worst possible. He has been very frightened and thinks himself a great coward and therefore feels no pride. But he has done everything his duty demanded and perhaps a bit more. Against this disaster, all you can produce on the credit side is a burst of ill temper with a dog that tripped him up, some excessive cigarette smoking, and the forgetting of a prayer. What is the use of whining to me about your difficulties, if you are proceeding on the enemy's idea of justice and suggesting that your opportunities and intentions should be taken into account? Then I am not sure that the charge of heresy does not lie against you. At any rate, you will soon find that the justice of hell is purely realistic and concerned only with results. Bring us back food or be food yourself. The only constructive passage in your letter is where you say that you still expect good results from the patient's fatigue. That is well enough, but it won't fall into your hands. Fatigue can produce extreme gentleness and quiet of mind, and even something like vision. If you have often seen men led into anger, malice, or impatience, that is because those men have had efficient tempters. The paradoxical thing is that moderate fatigue is a better soil for peevishness than absolute exhaustion. This depends partly on physical causes, but partly on something else. It is not fatigue simply, as such, that produces the anger, but unexpected demands on a man already tired. Whatever men expect, they soon come to think that have the right to. The sense of disappointment can, with very little skill on my part, be turned into a sense of injury. It is after men have given into the irredeemable, after they have despaired of relief and ceased to think even a half hour ahead, that the dangers of humbled and gentle weariness begin. To produce the best results from your patient's fatigue, therefore, you must feed him with false hopes. Put into his mind plausible reasons for believing that the air raid will not be repeated. Keep him comforting himself with the thought of how much he will enjoy his bed next night. Exaggerate the weariness by making him think it will soon be over, for men usually feel that a strain could have been endured no longer at the very moment when it is ending. or when they think it is ending. In this, as in the problem of cowardice, the thing to avoid is a total commitment. Whenever he says, let his inner resolution be not to bear whatever comes to him, but to bear it for a reasonable period, and let the reasonable period be shorter than the trial is likely to last. It needs not be much shorter in attacks or in patience, chastity, and fortitude. The fun of it is to make the man yield just when he has but known it, relief was almost in sight. I do not know whether he is likely to meet the goal under conditions of strain or not. If he does, make full use of the fact that up to a certain point, fatigue makes women talk more and men talk less. Much secret resentment, even between lovers, can be raised from this. Probably the scenes he is now witnessing with your provided material for an intellectual attack on his faith, your previous failures have put that out of your power, but there is a sort of attack in the emotions which can still be tried. It turns on making him feel, when at first he sees human remains plastered on a wall, that this is what the world is really like, and that all his religion has been fantasy. You will notice that we got him completely fogged about the meaning of the word real. They tell each other, and some great spiritual existence, all that really happened was that you heard some music in a lightened building. Here real means the bare physical facts, separated from the other elements in the experience they actually had. On the other hand, they will also say it is very well discussing that high dive as you sit there in the armchair, but wait till you get up there and see what it's really like. Here, real is being used in the composite sense of to mean not the physical facts, which they know already while discussing the matter in armchairs, but the emotional effect, whose facts will have on human consciousness. Neither application of the world could be defended, but our business is to keep the two going at once so that the emotional value of the world real can be placed now on one side of the account, now on the other, and as it happens to suit us. The general rule, which we now have pretty well established among them, is that in all experiences which can make them happier or better, or only the physical facts are real, while the spiritual elements are subjective. In all experience which can discourage or corrupt them from spiritual elements are the main reality, and to ignore them is to be an escapist. Thus in birth, the blood and pain are real, the rejoicing are merely subjective point of view. In death, the terror of ugliness revealed that death really means. The hatefulness and the hated person is real. In hatred, you see men as they are. You are disillusioned, but the loveliness of a loved person is merely a subjective haze concealing a real core of sexual appetite or economic association. Wars and poverty are really horrible. Peace and plenty are mere physical facts about which men happen to have certain sentiments. The creatures are always accusing one another of wanting to eat the cake and have it. But thanks to our labors, they are more often in a predicament of paying for the cake and not eating it. Your patient, properly handled, will have no difficulty in regarding his emotion at the sight of human entrails as the revelation of reality, and his emotion in the sight of happy children or fair weather as mere sentiment. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. My dear, my very dear Wormwood, my poppet, my pigsney. How mistakenly now that all is lost, you come whimpering to ask me whether the terms of affection in which I address you meant nothing from the beginning. Far from it. Rest assured, my love for you and your love for me are like as two peas. I have always desired you, and you, pitiful fool, desired me. The difference is that I am stronger. I think they will give you to me now, or a bit of you. Love you. Why yes, as dainty as morsel as ever I grew fat on. You have let the soul slip through your fingers. The howl of sharpened famine, for that loss re-echoes at this moment through all the levels of the kingdom of noise, down here in the very throne itself. It makes me mad to think of it. How well I know what happened at the instant when they snatched him from you. There was a sudden clearing of his eyes, was there not, as he saw you for the last time, and recognized the part you had had in him, and knew that you had it no longer. Just to think, and let it be the beginning of your agony, what he felt at that moment, as if a scab had fallen from an old sore, as if he were emerging from a hideous shell-like tetter, as if he was shuttled off for good and all a defiled, wet, clinging garment. By hell, in its misery enough, deceive them from their mortal days, coming off dirtied and uncomfortable clothes, and splashing in hot water, and giving little grunts of pleasure, stretching their eased limbs. What then of this final stripping, this complete cleansing? The more one thinks of it, the worse it becomes. He got through so easily. How gradual misgivings, no doctor's sentence, no nursing home, no operating the theater, no false hopes of life. Sheer, instantaneous liberation. One moment it seemed to be all our world. The screams of bombs, the fall of houses, the stink and taste of high explosive on the lips and in the lungs, the feet burning with weariness, the heart cold with horrors, the brain reeling, the legs aching. Next moment all of this was gone. Gone like a bad dream, never again to be an account. Defeated, outmaneuvered, fool. Did you mark how naturally, as if he had been born for it, the earth-born vermin entered the new life? How all his doubts became, in a twinkling of eye, ridiculous. I know what the creature was saying to itself. Yes, of course, I always was like this. All horrors have been followed the same course, getting worse and worse and forcing you into a kind of bottleneck till at the very moment when you thought you had been crushed, behold, you were out of the marrows and all was suddenly well. The extraction hurt more and more, and then the tooth was out. The dream became a nightmare, and then you woke. You die, and then you are beyond death. How could I have ever doubted it? As you saw, he also saw them. I know how it was. You reeled back dizzy and blinded, more hurt by them than he had ever been by bombs. The degradation of it, that this thing of earth and slime could stand upright and converse with spirits before whom you, a spirit, could only cower. Perhaps you had hoped that the awe of strangeness of it would dash his joy. But that is the cursed thing. The gods are strange to mortal eyes, and yet they are not strange. He had no faintest conception till that very hour of how they would work, and even doubted their existence. But when he saw them, he knew that he had always known them, and realized what part each one of them had played at many hour in his life, when he had supposed himself alone, so that now he could say to them, one by one, "Who are you?" But so it was you all the time. All that they were and said at this meeting woke memories. The dim consciousness of friends about him which had haunted his solitudes from infancy, was now at last explained. That central music in every pure experience, which had always just evaded memory, was now at last recovered. Recognition made him free of their company, almost before the limbs of his corpse became quiet. Only you were left outside. He saw not only them, he saw him. This animal thing, begotten in a bed, could look on him. What is blinding, suffocating fire to you is now a cool light to him, is clarity itself, and wears the form of a man. You would like, if you could, to interpret the patient's prosperation in the presence, his self-abhorrence and utter knowledge of his sins. Yes, Wormwood, a clearer knowledge even than yours, on the analogy of your own choking and paralyzing sensations when you encounter the deadly air that breathes from the heart of heaven. But it is all nonsense. Pains must he still have had to encounter, but they embrace those pains. They would not barter them for any earthly pleasure. All the delights of sense or heart or intellect with which you could once have tempted him, even the delights of virtue itself, now seem to him in compassion, but as the half-nauseous attractions of all rattled harlot would seem to a man who hears that his true beloved, whom he had loved all his life, and whom he had believed to be dead, is alive, and even now at his door. He is caught up into the world where pain and pleasure take on transcendent values, and all our arithmetic is dismayed. Once more, the inexplicable meets us. Next to the curse of useless tempters like yourself, the greatest curse upon is the failure of our intelligence department. If only we could find out what he was really up to. Alas, that knowledge in itself, so hateful and mawkish a thing, should yet be necessary for power. Sometimes I am almost in despair. All that sustains me is the conviction that our realism, our rejection, in the face of all temptations of a silly nonsense and claptrap, must win in the end. Meanwhile, I have you to settle with. Most truly do I sign myself, your increasingly and ravenously affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Thank you for listening to the narration of the Screwtape Letters written by C.S. Lewis. It has been a pleasure reading through this novel out loud and recording it in video. If you have enjoyed this, please don't hesitate to subscribe, like, comment, share, so that way I know to continue making stories and narrations like this. It is truly a pleasure to be able to do all this, release this content out into the world. I do thank you all for the continued support, and once again, thank you for listening. Until next time, God bless.